Client contacts you and asks you, how much do you charge for family portraits? That might sound like a pricing question, but it might be the only question they really know how to ask. They may not know what they want the portraits to become. They may not know where they want the portraits to live. They may not know how clothing, size, style, expression, framing, or display will affect the final result. They likely don't even know what a professional portrait experience can include. Well, when the client begins from that kind of uncertainty, you have a choice. You can answer only the surface level question, or you can be a guide who helps them understand the path. Hey there, Lens Legends. Welcome to another episode of the Portrait Profit Show, where we focus on the business side of photography. I'm your host, Jim Landers, your guide on the business side. The Portrait Profit Show is brought to you by Digital Pro Lab and Landers Photography School. For Digital Pro Lab, Amanda and her amazing, wonderful team are going to make you look like a hero, and that's just by default. They are fantastic. Amanda hires fantastic people. They do a great job, but it's by default because they love what they do. I recommend that you give Digital Pro Lab a shot by going to digitalprolab.com. Let me put that on the screen right now, digitalprolab.com. Now, this coming week is Labor Day weekend, and they will be closed Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, but you can still order online, and you've got the whole week ahead of you. So just so you know, but digitalprolab.com, go there, see the difference that they can make. The show is also sponsored by Landers Photography School. That's my company. I teach both the photography side and the business side, and I'd like for you to take advantage of something. It's a free gift that I'm giving to you. I'll put it up on the screen right now. This is a link to my calendar. If you go to calendly.com/photoschool/15min, I'm going to give you a free 15-minute live session, just the two of us talking about you and your goals and how to reach them. Take advantage of that. You might have to hit pause and go back. You might come back afterwards. I might show it again during the show, but take advantage of that. Now, I also encourage you throughout the show to ask questions and make comments just by going over to the comments section and in just adding whatever comments or questions or statements that you want to make. But speaking of comments section, I want you to go there right now and enter in hashtag live. Hashtag live. That tells me you're watching on either Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn or YouTube, because we're simulcast to several different places. For those that are watching the replay, please comment hashtag replay. And I request one thing of you, and that's to click the share button. Let other people know about the Portrait Profit Show. You know, a strong client experience does not begin at the session, but it lasts long after the images are created. Your ability to ask beneficial questions, to listen, to explain, recommend, and guide, these things determine whether the client feels cared for or left to figure things out themselves. Prospects don't come to a portrait photographer with a complete understanding of what they need or what you do. They have a feeling, an urge, or an idea. They may know they want family portraits, a senior portrait, a business portrait, a meaningful image of someone they love. But that does not mean they know how to move from desire to finished result. That's why they're calling you. They may not know what to prepare, what clothing choices are going to support the final portrait, how the ordering process works, what size belongs on the wall, and none of that is their problem. It is a part of hiring a professional. You know that your responsibility includes creating strong images, but it also requires guiding the client through the decisions that allow those images to become useful, meaningful, finished. That guidance requires warmth, competence, clear questions, honest recommendations, and a process the client can trust. This is what I mean by client leadership skills. You know, the phrase people skills can drift into the wrong territory based on what we're talking about today. Some material on the subject focuses on reading people, gaining influence, spotting manipulation, or controlling conversations. That direction is not useful for the kind of photography business we're building here. You do not need psychological tricks. You need the communication skills to understand the client, to guide the process, and help the finished portraits become what they were meant to become. You know, this lesson closely connects to several of the past Portrait Profits shows, such as in the Anti-Salesperson's Club, episode number 207. We talked about sales as helping people get what they want. In Create a Signature Process, which was episode number 216, we talked about giving the client experience structure and clarity. In Full Service Photography, episode number 272, we talked about guiding the image all the way to its intended use. In Custom Photography Project, episode number 275, we talked about defining the need before naming a price. And one more, in Terminal Clarity, episode number 277, we talked about how the deeper responsibility of photographing people who are loved by someone. Because everyone is, hopefully. Client leadership brings all those ideas together. It is where communication, process, sales, service, and meaning all meet. So let's move into chapter 1. By the way, if you hear something that you like, there's a like button for that. I want to see you click that like button. If you haven't already, entering hashtag live, let me know you're watching live. The first question in an inquiry, that's just the doorway into a whole building. It's the first language the person has available. So you'll hear questions or maybe statements like, how much are your sessions? Do you offer digitals? How long does this take? Do you have anything available this weekend? I just need a few pictures. I don't need anything fancy. You know, those may sound small, practical, or transactional, but often they come from a person who knows they want something, but they've not yet shaped that desire into a clear result. And often they don't yet understand what decisions are ahead, such as a family may not or may know the children are growing quickly, but they have not considered whether the finished portrait should become wall art, an album, gifts for grandparents, digital images for social media sharing, or a combination of all the above. A business owner may know their current profile image is outdated, but they may not know how expression or lighting, clothing, background, cropping, and usage all affect the final portrait and how it's perceived by their audience. A high school senior's parents may know that this milestone deserves to be remembered and documented, but they may not know how to plan a session that reflects the student while also creating something meaningful for the family. The person who is reaching out, well, they're feeling the desire, but they are relying on you for the rest, and they don't know what that entails. When we know this, we can answer the questions and respond to the statements while leading the conversation towards understanding for both parties, them and ourselves. A price question can lead into purpose. A digital file question can lead into intended use. A scheduling question can lead into what the person wants these portraits to become. The surface question gets that communication started, but it is not the whole need. A price-first conversation invites comparison. We don't actually want that. A purpose-first conversation, that invites clarity. If someone asks you what you charge, you can acknowledge the question and still lead towards understanding by responding with something like, I can absolutely walk you through that. Or I am happy to talk about our fees. And then follow that up by moving into gaining understanding by saying something like, first, let me ask a couple of questions so I understand what you want. Or you could ask for permission to continue by saying, do you mind if I ask a couple of questions so I understand what you're looking for? I lean towards asking permission at this stage. That single shift changes the relationship. You're no longer a vendor responding to a price request. You're a professional helping someone define what they're trying to accomplish. This is especially important in portrait photography because the person reaching out may not have the words for the outcome yet. They may begin by saying, we need family pictures. But through a better conversation, they may realize they want a large portrait above the fireplace, or maybe a grouping above the hallway, an album for a coffee table, maybe a legacy piece for the next generation. They may not have known how to ask for that, or even know when they reached out what they might want, or that was something that they wanted. You're the professional. You gather enough information to understand what they want. Then you help them see a clear path towards what they want. If you watched episode number 272, this was called Full Service Photography. We talked about the image reaching the last possible state required by its intended use. That idea begins here in the first conversation. Before you can guide an image to completion, you have to understand what completion means for that person. In the driving analogy that I use so often, if someone tells you where they want to go, you can give them directions on what roads to take to get there. With your interest in them and your willingness to understand them, your guidance helps people move forward towards clarity. This making sense? Can you feel this? Do you understand what I'm talking about? Give me a yes in the comments. Let me know. Make sure to hit that yes button, or that yes, the like button and the love button each time you hear something that you like. By the way, if you can only click the like button or the love button one time, all you have to do is click on my face of the video, and you can click it as many times as you want to. Let's move on to chapter 2. By the way, if you haven't already, enter in #live, letting me know that you're watching live. All right, moving to chapter 2. Client leadership is service. Client leadership is the professional skill of guiding someone along a path they do not fully understand yet. That guidance is not control. It's not pressure. It's not manipulation. It's not pretending to know what people want before listening to them, or steering people toward whatever you most want to sell. Client leadership is service. It means you understand the process well enough to help the client move through it with confidence. It means the client is not left alone to make decisions they don't have enough context to make well. It means you ask thoughtful questions, listen carefully, explain clearly, recommend honestly, and keep the experience from becoming confusing or vague. I mean, this matters even more for professional photographers because because most people rarely, if ever, buy professional photography. And those that have may hire a portrait photographer only a few times in their lifetime. Even clients who value photography may not understand the decisions behind a strong result. They may not know what needs to happen before the photography session or during the session, after the session, and before the finished portraits are delivered. That lack of knowledge is exactly why your leadership matters. That's why it's so important for you to have a clear understanding of the entire process. You probably remember this from another Portrait Profits episode where I said that you need to write down your entire client process, every single step, from your point of view and from their point of view. That way you create two timelines, a timeline for them, a timeline for you. That way you can see the gaps in your process. And there will be gaps if you haven't done this before. No matter how good you are, no matter how long you've done this, no matter how much people love you, if you haven't timelined your process from both your point of view and your client's point of view, there will be gaps and they will become obvious and you can fix it. Think about a professional in another field. When someone hires an architect, a designer, an attorney, a financial planner, a doctor, a contractor, a consultant, they are not hiring that person simply because they want some tasks completed. They're hiring them because the professional knows how to ask the right questions and identify what matters. They can avoid common mistakes. They can explain options and guide the client to a result that they want. It's the same thing with photography. The client brings what matters to them. You bring the process that turns that meaning into finished work. This is why I use the word guide. It's why it matters so much in your business. A guide does not drag people through the process. They don't trick people. They don't shame them for not already knowing what's going to happen. A guide knows the terrain. They understand the destination, and they help the other person travel with more confidence than they could have done alone. That posture is client leadership. In episode number 216, Create a Signature Process, we talked about giving the client journey structure, clarity, and a name. A strong process helps clients trust the path before they fully understand every step. Client leadership skills build on that foundation by helping you lead the person through the process with warmth, confidence, and clear communication. The client should feel that there is a path, that you know the path, and that you care enough to walk them along that path. That is service. Are you resonating with this? Tell me. Put yes in the comments. If you haven't already, enter in #live. Let's move into chapter 3. Warmth and competence. A prospect needs to feel two things from you: warmth and competence. Warmth says, I am safe with this person. Competence tells them I can trust this person to lead me. Both are necessary. So let's take a look at each one by themselves. Warmth. A person with warmth, but little competence, may be friendly, nice, encouraging, and pleasant to talk to. But the prospect may still feel uncertain. The process may feel vague. The next step may be unclear. The consultation may wander off into conversations that aren't beneficial. The pricing may be explained with hesitation or defensiveness. The ordering appointment may feel overwhelming. The prospect may like you and still feel unsure about investing or following your recommendations. All right, let's talk about competence. A person with competence, but little warmth, may appear skilled, experienced, and capable, but the client may feel guarded. The process may feel efficient, but cold. The recommendations may be accurate, but they may come across as abrupt. You may know what to do, but the client may not feel emotionally safe enough to ask you questions, admit concerns, or relax with you. The strongest client experience brings both together. Warmth shows up in ways you listen, the way you respond, the way you slow down, the way you reassure without dismissing, and the way you help people feel seen. Competence shows up in your process, your preparation, your clear explanations, your recommendations, boundaries, and your ability to convey what happens next. This combination is especially important for portrait photographers because being photographed can feel vulnerable. People bring insecurities with them. You know this. They may worry about how they look. They may worry about how their children are going to cooperate, whether their spouse wants to even be there, whether they're choosing the right clothing, whether the session will feel awkward, or whether they can afford the finished portraits. Your communication either adds to that uncertainty or it reduces it. Warmth without competence can sound like, "Don't worry, it'll be fine." Competence with warmth sounds more like, "I'll guide you through that. We'll plan the clothing together. I'll help you understand what photographs we need to create. And during the session, I'll direct you so you're not wondering what to do." That response gives the client something to trust. Warmth and competence also belong in your marketing. They need to feel this before they've ever reached out to you, or they are likely not to reach out to you. A website with only emotional language may feel pleasant but unclear. A website with only technical or product language may feel informative but impersonal. The stronger message helps the prospect feel understood while also showing that you have a process. The same is true in inquiry responses. A warm but weak response says, "Thanks for reaching out. I'd love to photograph your family. Here's my prices." A warmer and more competent response says, "Thank you for reaching out. I'd love to help you create this for your family. The best next step is a quick conversation so I can understand what you want for these portraits, what you want them to become, and I'll walk you through how this process works." One response gives information, the other is leadership. The people you speak with should not have to wonder whether you care, and they should not have to wonder whether you know what you're doing. Both warmth and competence should be obvious to them. You guys agree? Tell me yes in the comments. If you haven't already, enter in #live. And just a reminder, I'll let this go across the bottom of the screen here. As you know, every single one of the Portrait Profit shows has a handout that goes along with it. In order to get it, you have to ask. That's it. Now, I do send a donation form with it, and you can pay something towards that, or you don't. It doesn't matter to me. It has a suggested donation, but you can do whatever the heck you want. Do it or don't. My main goal is to get the handout into your hands. And so you can see it going across the screen right now. Just send me an email, jim@portraitprofits.com, jim@portraitprofits.com. All right. Chapter 4. Listening before recommending. You know, the right to recommend, you don't just get to recommend. You have to earn the right. The right to recommend is earned by listening. I like to convey this with an analogy. If you go to a grocery store, find the nearest employee and ask, "How much is a bag of groceries?" They'll either give you the answer or a weird face. What do you think they're going to do? They don't know the answer to that question. So you're going to get a weird face. You must earn the right to give a response. So in this instance, they would have to know what you want in your bag in order to give you a response. So they can't. Many of us do. We give a response. We recommend too early. We hear a familiar question and answer out of habit. We hear how much and we send the price list. Would you call a restaurant asking how much and expect the person on the phone to start reading off the entire menu? Of course not. And neither should you. You need to find out what they want first. We hear questions like, do you offer digitals? And explain packages. We hear, we need just a few photos, and assume what the client means. We hear, we're interested in family portraits, and move immediately into scheduling. The better move is to slow the conversation down enough to understand their purpose. You could ask questions like, what made you decide now is the right time for these portraits? Or how about, how do you want to feel when you look at these finished portraits? Or what are you hoping these photographs become? Where do you imagine enjoying them? Who are these portraits for? What would make this feel worth doing? Is there anything about being photographed that concerns you? Those questions do more than gather information. They change the level of the conversation. They help the client think about the meaning, the use, the purpose, and the outcome instead of only price, time, and number of digital files. This is not about forcing every conversation to become deep or emotional. Some clients have a practical need, and that's fine. It's great. A business portrait client may need a confident image for LinkedIn, or a website, or for speaking materials. A family may want a simple update because relatives are visiting. A high school senior, may want portraits that feel personal and fun, making this brief moment of their life important, showing it off, causing it to be easily remembered. The point is not to make every session carry the same emotional weight. The point is to understand the real reason or reasons behind the request so that your guidance fits. Listening also protects you from assumption. A client who asks for digital files is not necessarily rejecting prints. They may simply believe image files are what photographers sell. There's been so many times where I've talked with a mom and she said every other photographer only sold digital files. I didn't know that prints were an option. And yet I hear photographers say all the time, everybody just wants digital files. Well, it's because your communication has room for improvement. A client who asks for a short session may not be trying to minimize your value. They may be worried that their children won't last long. A client who asks for a low price is probably not disrespecting your work. They just may not yet understand what's included, what decisions are involved, or what finished result is even possible. These are times when a prospect, there are times when a prospect is not a fit. That's real. But too often, we're deciding that too soon. And when we do that, we can miss opportunities to educate, to guide, and to serve the right people. This is where some people skills, some of that material can become dangerous. If you become too focused on reading body language or spotting hidden motives or interpreting every hesitation as resistance, you might stop listening and start judging. That's not useful to either party. The goal is not to diagnose the client. The goal is to understand them. If a client hesitates, ask with kindness, I sense this may feel like a lot to decide at once. Would it be helpful to isolate a certain part of this and talk it through? If a client seems unsure, clarify the path by saying, would it help if I walk you through what happens next? If a client asks a small question, answer it while keeping the larger purpose in view. You could say something like, that's a good question. Let me answer that. And then I want to ask you one more thing so I can make sure I'm guiding you in the right direction. Listening creates the right to lead. Without listening, leadership may feel like pressure. With listening, leadership is care. Chapter 5. A client experience becomes most vulnerable when decisions need to be made. The inquiry requires a decision. Should we take the next step with this photographer? The consultation requires decisions. What do we want? What should we wear? Who needs to be included? What style makes sense? Where will these portraits live? The session requires decisions. Where do we stand? How do we interact? What expression feels right? How do we keep everyone comfortable? The ordering appointment requires decisions. Which portraits? What size? Which product? Which rooms are going to be displayed in? Which grouping? Which finish? Which frame? How much? If you are passive during those moments, the client carries the weight alone. And aren't you supposed to be the expert? Many of us think we are being helpful by giving lots of options. We list every product, every size, every package, every possibility, every location, every clothing idea, every background option, every gallery choice. The intention may be generous, but the result, it's overwhelm. A professional recommendation isn't pressure, it is service. So for a family portrait, you might say something like, based on what you told me, I would start by considering the living room wall. Or for a business portrait, since these images are for your website and speaking materials, we should plan for both horizontal and vertical crops. Let's say it's a mom who wants her kids photographed. Because the children are this age, I recommend we plan the session earlier in the day and that we keep the clothing simple. Let's say you're talking to a mom who's going to have her parents there at a family portrait session. Since your parents will be a part of this, I want to make sure that we create a portrait of them alone as well as with the full family. So these statements help the client feel cared for because they connect to your expertise and to the client's stated purpose. This also changes the way you handle hesitation. I've mentioned hesitation twice before. Let me make sure I give you a definition of what that means so you know what I'm talking about. Hesitation is a pause, delay, or reluctance before making a decision or taking the next step. Hesitation is often a signal that the prospect or client needs more clarity, confidence, information, reassurance, or time before moving forward. So when a client hesitates, it is often just unprocessed information. The client may need to understand the difference between products. They may need to see scale. They may need to compare two wall groupings. They may need to talk through where the portrait will live. They may need to understand payment options. They may need reassurance that they're making a decision that they'll appreciate years from now. The less experienced photographer may hear a hesitation and think they don't value what I do or they don't value photography. But in the mind of an experienced photographer, there's going to be a stronger question. What do they need in order to make a confident decision? That question changes everything. It's mindset. If a client says, I'm not sure, there's no reason to panic. There's no reason to push. There's no reason to withdraw. You can say, that makes sense. There are several good options here. Let's narrow it down by starting with where you feel that you want to enjoy these portraits. If a client says, that feels expensive, or that is expensive, you can say, I understand. Let's look at what matters most to you so the decision stays connected to the result you actually want. If a client says, can we just get the image files? You can say, we can talk about the best way for you to have what you need. Before we decide that, let's look at what you want these portraits to become. If the final result is something for your wall, I can guide that for you. If the final result is digital use, we can make sure those files are prepared for that purpose. That's not surrendering your process. It's not shaming your client. It's guiding the conversation towards purpose. Boundaries belong here too. Boundaries are the limits, rules, expectations, and standards that you are intentionally establishing to define how your business operates, how you want things to go. A lot of photographers, a lot of people in general really think of boundaries as something that may make us seem difficult. But in reality, clear boundaries often make the client experience feel safer, more confident. A client wants to know what happens next. They want to know what's included. They want to know what's not included. When decisions are made, they want to know when payment is due, how products are ordered, how files are delivered, and what are you responsible for. So a boundary can be warm. In fact, you could say something like, here is how we handle that. That's how you share a boundary. You could say something like, that option is not part of what I offer, but I can guide you toward what will give you the result you described. How about finished portraits are ordered separately after you see them, so you're choosing from images that you love. Let's talk about what you might say for a wedding. Payment is completed before the wedding day, so you have one less thing to think about as the date gets close. By the way, my opinion on that is it is rude to ask someone to pay you on their wedding day. How thoughtless. They have a lot of things going on. And you want them to think about paying you that day? No, make sure that you're paid ahead of time so that they're not dealing with that amongst the things that they really should be dealing with. That's just me. You do it. You do you. So those statements create structure. Structure reduces confusion. Confusion is one of the biggest enemies of trust. In episode number 207, the Anti-Salesperson Club, we talked about how sales is helping people get what they want. That idea belongs at the center of this section. We're not trying to defeat objections. You're trying to understand what the client wants and help them make decisions that support it. Sales becomes service when the recommendation is connected to the client's desire. So let's talk about the path. This is chapter 6. By the way, just one more reminder, you can get today's handout simply by sending me an email, jim@portraitprofits.com. By the way, you can get even the past ones that way. You just have to tell me which one you want. So jim@portraitprofits.com, and you can get a copy of today's handout or one in the past. Chapter 6. Client leadership becomes stronger when it is built into the process instead of saved for moments when something becomes difficult. A helpful way to think about this is as a path. And this, I'm going to put this on the screen so you can see this. By the way, if you're watching on Instagram, you're not going to be able to see this because I have it horizontal. So I'm going to tell you what it says. Clarify, connect, recommend, simplify, complete. All right, the first step. First step is clarify. Before you present a solution, understand the desire. What made the client reach out now? What do they want these portraits to become? Who are they for? Where might they be seen? What would make this successful? This is where you avoid guessing or assuming. In episode number 275, Custom Photography Project, we talked about defining the need before structuring the offer. This same principle belongs in ordinary portrait inquiries. Understanding comes before recommendation. The second step, connect. Once you understand what matters, connect the desire to your process. If the client wants something meaningful for the home, explain how planning, clothing, location, artwork size, and display decisions support that result. If the client needs a business portrait, explain how expression, lighting, background, clothing, cropping, and file preparation support that intended use. If the client's planning an extended family portrait during a rare family get-together, explain how timing, location, group combinations, and a primary contact will help the session run smoothly. This helps the client see that your process exists to support what they said they wanted. The third step, recommend. A professional eventually needs to make some recommendations. Some are recommending too soon. Others stay neutral for too long because they're afraid of sounding pushy. Maybe they list the options and hope the client chooses one. But that makes more work for the client, not less. A thoughtful recommendation reduces uncertainty. You could say, you know what, based on what you've told me, this is the direction I recommend. That is a service statement. The fourth step, simplify. Clients can become overwhelmed when every option is treated equally relevant, meaning you're giving no recommendation. Instead of saying, here are all the options, you might say, you know what, based on what you told me, I would start with these two options. Instead of saying, what size do you want? You might say, for that wall, this is the size I would recommend. Instead of saying, choose your favorites, you might say, let's first identify the portraits that best express what you said you wanted for this session. Simplifying is not taking away choice, it's helping choice become manageable. The fifth and final step is complete. Client leadership does not end when the session is over. It continues through selection, product decisions, production, delivery, and follow-up. In episode number 272, Full Service Photography, we talked about the image reaching the last possible state required by its intended use. If the image was created for professional digital use, it should be prepared, delivered, and ready for that use, where the client doesn't have to do anything except upload it. If the image was created as portrait artwork, it should be produced, finished, delivered, and displayed as intended. What does finished means? It means whatever you guys discussed. It could mean that it's on canvas and you don't want to frame. It could mean that it's on canvas and you do. It could mean it's on any surface and you want it framed or don't want it framed. But you've talked about this ahead of time. That's what finished means. You've talked about it and you've completed it. You've delivered it. And it's displayed as intended. I install my work, but that's what full service does. You don't have to do that if you don't do full service. If the images were created for an album, the album should be designed, produced, and delivered, and ready to be enjoyed. Completion is part of leadership. This path, clarify, connect, recommend, simplify, create. This is part of your business because it creates consistency. You're not improvising every inquiry, every consultation, every sales conversation, and every client concern. There is a way of leading. There is a way of asking. There is a way of explaining. There is a way of helping the client move from uncertainty to clarity. That consistency increases trust. It also increases your perceived value. And that makes your price look reasonable, acceptable, justified. When the client thinks the job is simply take pictures and send files, comparison to other photographers is easy. It makes you part of the crowd. One photographer has this price. Another has that price. One includes this many files. Another includes more. But when the client understands the guidance, planning, design, preparation, expression, product decisions, and finished result, they are no longer comparing file count to another photographer's file count. They are comparing process and outcome. This is one reason referrals become stronger when the process is clear. People can talk about a clear experience. They can tell a friend. They could say something like, she walked us through everything. Or he helped us figure out what looked best in our home. They made the process look easy or feel easy. They made the process easy. I never felt lost. We knew exactly what to expect. That is easier to remember and easier to share than simply the photos were nice. When you lead well, you create less confusion, more confidence, and a stronger client experience. That's not a wild goose chase. That's a professional advantage. In just a moment, I'm going to tell you about the upcoming episodes. But for now, I want to close out this lesson. Client leadership skills help you become more useful to the people who trust you. The client needs warmth so they feel safe with you, competence so they can trust you, questions that help them think, explanations that make the process understandable, recommendations that reduce overwhelm, boundaries that create professionalism, and a path that helps their photographs become what those photographs were meant to become. When you understand this, the business side of photography becomes more connected to the human side of photography. Communication, consultation, pricing, sales, products, and delivery are not separate from the meaning of the work. They are how the meaning is carried through the process. You know what? This connects back to episode number 277, Terminal Clarity. Every person who steps in front of your camera is loved by someone. Every portrait has the possibility of becoming more important later than anyone fully understands today. So if that is true, then our guidance matters. The way we listen matters. The way we speak matters. The way we prepare matters. And the way we help clients make decisions, that matters too. The portrait is not only created with a camera, it's also protected by your process. Client leadership is one of the ways we honor the trust that has been placed in us. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson. But now I want to tell you about what's coming up next, because I think you're going to like it. As you know, the Portrait Profit Show is every Monday. So let's take a look at the upcoming episodes. In 1 week from today, I want you to create the incentive. This is on September 7th at noon. We're going to talk about how to create personal incentives that help you repeat the right actions, build momentum, and move your business towards the success and freedom that you actually want. On September 21st at noon. If you haven't planned next year yet, all right, you need to do it. But if you haven't by September 21st, let's do it then. And then on September 28th, put these on your calendar. September 28th, 10 steps to an effective promotion. Now, for a lot of people, fall going into the holidays is a busy time. So let's maximize your marketing impact. We're going to uncover the 10 essential steps to promotions that attract, engage, and convert. So you can turn your next marketing campaign into a client magnet. And I want to tell you about just one more on October 5th. I want you to build the team that you don't employ. You may be the only person working in your photography business, but that does not mean you can provide every kind of knowledge, protection, production, and problem solving the business is going to require. So we're going to identify the professionals and partners who support a strong photography business, those who are not going to become employees. You will learn how to find them, evaluate whether the people you rely on are truly prepared to help, establish backup resources, and build those connections before a problem forces you to search under pressure. So that is on October 5th. So every single Monday at noon, with the exception of the second Monday of each month where we move it to 6:30 in the evening. All right. Lens Legends. By the way, if this is the first episode you've ever watched, that's you. You're a Lens Legend. Lens Legends, thank you for joining me for this episode of the Portrait Profit Show. The better you guide your client, the more confidence they bring to each decision that they're making. Warmth helps them feel cared for. Competence helps them trust the process. Clear guidance helps the finished portraits become something that clients can enjoy, share, display, and be proud of. Thank you, Lens Legends, for your time and attention here today. And thank you for the hard work you put into building a business that elevates the entire industry. I will see you next Monday for Landers Photography School and Digital Pro Lab. This is Jim Landers on the Portrait Profit Show. And I look forward to watching you grow. You're awesome. And I really appreciate you. Bye for now.